Okay, we have a lot of work to do. I'm starting with my basic jacket foundation slopers front and back. And we are going to work to build a jacket with a notched collar. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the front. This is the one that's going to need a lot of heavy lifting. Actually, I'm just going to go ahead and tape this in place. Okay, so the very first thing we want to do is extend our shoulder line out at neck by 1 inch. And what this is determining now is the height that we want our rolled collar stand to be. And that's at the actual center back neck that'll be at the collar. It does not mean that there's going to be a separate piece per se for this roll. It is just determining how high we want the collar to stand on the neck itself. So I'm doing 1 inch, that's pretty standard, so mark that. And then from there we want to mark 1 inch above the apex, just a reference line. And then we want to draw a line from this collar stand point that extended out from the shoulder. To the bust point, that revised bust point line here. So up 1 inch from apex. And then you can definitely just extend this outward. I'm going to show you why that's important. So next you want to determine your extension here. So your extension from center front is going to differ based off of your button size, button height, or if you wanted a double-breasted jacket per se. But let's say I'm going to do just a single-breasted jacket, which just means 1 row of buttons that'll line up vertically. And if I'm using a button that's 3/4 of an inch, I want to make my extension 1/4 more than that if I have a standard button height. So I'm extending this by 1 inch, and I'm talking full scale. And then this will be your break point. So that point forms from this roll line that we drew from the extended shoulder to the bust line down to this new center front point. So this includes our extension, which helps us form the new center front of our pattern piece, as well as our roll line. So roll line is very important to remember when we are drafting a jacket pattern. And all that means is that is where that jacket's going to roll over on body, forming the actual lapel. So here comes the tricky part here. And I feel like I should have my tracing wheel handy, and I don't. This is a small piece. The next thing we want to do is we want to fold along this roll line. So we're going to fold along the roll line. Like so. And then I don't have my tracing wheel handy, and this is so small, I'm just going to go ahead and punch it with the pins. You want to trace off your original neckline. So this here, I'm going to highlight it just so you can see it. So we're tracing off this original neckline by using our tracing wheel so that then it will reflect onto the excess of the tracing paper here. And then just to show you this line again, it's here. So this is now helpful when we are drawing our lapel. So the only purpose of this is so that we can get that lapel so that it's very complementary on body. So to create that lapel, you want to extend that neckline down by 1 3/4 of an inch. You hit that with a notch, and this will start to form your lapel. The next point that's important is the other side of this notched lapel. So there's a little bit of balance play you have to do here. We want it to be squared to the original center front line, not to the roll line. So we want this to be squared to the center front. It must meet this point here and extend out by 2 inches full scale. So again, this first measure, the extension down from the neck, is 1 3/4. The second measure is 2 inches full scale. And then here's where you start to see some shape start to take place. So now we're going to draw a line from this portion of the notched collar or notched lapel down to your break point. So this is almost done. You don't want a straight line for your lapel here. You want it to bow out just slightly. I'll use a blue highlighter for that. Great place for a hip curve, and it's ever so slightly. It'll meet back at 0 at break point and the top of your lapel here, but just a slight bow. And that just, it really frames the face quite nicely. So from here, now we want to fold on that roll line again. And the proper way would be to trace this with your tracing wheel. But since I'm experienced in working with a mini scale, I'm going to just punch it with a pin. Okay. So this is really where we need to be able to see the lapel. Take this tape off if I can. Okay. So really the drawing of the lapel over here on the body is just to get a good eye for what it's going to look like on body. But the way that we have to sew this form our pattern is we have to have the transfer over here past the roll line, so opposite of the roll line that we have been working with. So really that is it for the lapel. Your actual front body pattern piece will follow the original neckline down to your lapel and your extension here. So that is what you will have here for that piece, but we do want to, while we're working here, go ahead and draft the actual collar. So the collar itself, we want to give it a little bit of shape. So the best way to do that is to have some points of measure. So I want to come back by 1/4 inch here at the shoulder. So just right here at the shoulder point. And again, this is from original neckline back. Go ahead and find your mid neckline here. So I'm just going to mark that obnoxiously so you guys can see it. Have handy the measurement of your back neckline. So whatever this measures, have this plus 1/8. You want to draw this line from mid neck to that 1/4 inch point that we made here and extend it back. And that extension from shoulder back will match your back neckline plus that 1/8 of an inch. So we'll just make a mark here. And then from here, because again, we just want to add shape to it. You know, our bodies aren't flat. So you want to come back by 1/2 inch here. And that's from this back neckline extension. So back 1/2, draw an arrow here. And then that will help us begin to form our collar shape. But the next thing we want to do is find midpoint here. So midpoint of this back neck extension. Use a different color. So we're going to draw a line from this 1/2 inch extension that was from the top of the back neck to the midpoint of that back neck measurement. And this is going to allow us a squared center back collar. So we're going to square from this now purple line up by whatever you want your collar height to be plus that collar stand height. So I'm going to go full scale 2 3/4 inches up. And this gives me the center back of my collar. So we want to take that 2 3/4 here and square it out from this original shoulder extension at the shoulder point. Again, 2 3/4. And now we're going to pinpoint our collar. So the collar, we want there to be a 3/4 inch gap between the lapel and the collar. And we want the collar length to be 1 3/4 inch. And it's going to meet up at this notch point. So I actually like to use my ruler two ways. I like to measure it at the same time, measure my gap at the same time that I'm measuring the length that I actually want that collar tip to be. So again, estimate like a 3/4 inch gap here, 1 3/4 inch line. And then let's use a green highlighter to really show our collar shaping. So you can use a French curve here to draft that collar shape. Smooth it out along the back here, and then round it down to the front. And quite simply, you've got your notched lapel front and your collar. And since we did bump this out a 1/4 inch here, you want to trace your collar separately, and I would just allow this to be a template more than your true pattern piece here. I do want to talk quickly about the back body. I'll just tape this guy down too. So we do want to have a little bit of shape here at the center back. The best way to do that is to take it in by 5/8 of an inch at hem, but then at this mid armhole point, blend it. So let's just say 5/8 inch here. And another great place for a hip curve, it's just a really nice place to add a contour shape, is along the back, especially because we've taken those fish eyes out. We've taken out a lot of shaping, but this allows for a really nice lay on body. But while we're taking this in, we also want to create a vent. So that vent, like you can kind of see where my waist is here. We want to take the vent and extend it. I like to do 2 inches past, and the blue line is now our center back line. So 2 inches past that line. And parallel down with the center back to the hem. And I'm going to use a 1.5 inch hem allowance, which is so important on jackets, to have a hem allowance. It's definitely a little more hefty than what you would typically use on a blouse. And we do want that here at the front too. So I know we've got a lot going on, but just to quickly touch, and my PDF will be a heck of a lot more clear. But we do want to have a facing. So that facing, we want to hit 2 inches in from our neck, our original neck point. It'll be 3.5 inches down here from the extension in. Great place for a hip curve. But this gives us our facing. And the facing is actually what you will see on body. What we've drafted here rolls inward toward the lower half of the body. So the facing is, that is what's visual. So draw that facing line. And super interesting with the hem here. So we do want this 1.5 inch hem again. But that hem has got to extend 1/2 inch past this facing point here. And that gives us our 1.5 inch hem allowance here. I am going to show you guys something that's super odd, and I know it's not highlighted in the book, but it's something that I really like to do when I'm sewing a jacket myself. If I want to keep any sort of shaping like a dart, I know I mentioned this in class, but darts can be used for both men and women. So I know a lot of the time we think of fisheye darts being super helpful, nipping it in at the waist, leading to the bust and leading to your hip line. But it is a great place to give it to a man as well. It just makes them have a, I don't know, like a more buff appearance, I guess, like larger shoulder to torso ratio. So great place for a fisheye. However, I do not want my fisheye to run into a pocket. So I actually, if I plan to keep a fisheye for a jacket, I will only keep the top half and just nix the bottom. So the purpose here is pretty much the same. We just want to cut out a little bit of this bulk. But what's interesting, if we do this, we've got to incorporate the dart width somewhere else into sewing. And this is like specifically important. Really, I would only do a half fisheye if I was planning to do a welt pocket here. So I'm going to do my welt pocket. But then wherever this fisheye lies, which is, you know, the primary point here is along the waistline. So here's where our little nipped in waist is at the side seam to that fisheye. So whatever this width of the dart is, has to be pitched out here at the side seam. So if we have a 1/2 inch wide dart, your side seam is now going to have this bump out here. Your hip will still remain the same. So it'll still come in, but it will have this L-shaped pattern piece. And then before, you always have to be thinking in your head when you're drafting, what steps am I going to take while sewing to make this happen? The dart will always be my first step here. So I would actually even keep this waistline marked because I would plan to cut here, sew my dart, and then draft my pocket. I'm gonna make one more call out. I know this is a lot to think about. But when we do the facing piece, which will again, it'll incorporate the extension for the lapel here. We want this to bow out ever so slightly too. And that is on the facing and the facing only, because when it rolls over, you do not actually want to see any sort of seam line at this point. You only want to see your facing and your facing alone. So if you can extend the facing out by a hair, like again, just 1/8 of an inch, it could be even just a 1/16 of an inch, something to keep that seam line rolled under. It just helps for an overall nicer look on body. So out of what I've drafted here, you're going to have 4 pieces. You will have your back body, your front body with the lapel, your collar, and then your lapel facing. So I hope that's clear. Definitely follow along with the PDF.